And we begin once again in Minnesota, where Governor Tim Walz is unsuccessfully trying to keep the lid on a massive fraud scandal. Just keeps growing by the day, and which now seems to be even more extensive than we previously believed. Despite Walz's claim that he takes full responsibility for not recognizing the damage sooner and that he's doing everything he can to stop it, lawmakers have now discovered yet another sector of welfare fraud going on in their state. Now, this one currently taking place in Minnesota's adult daycare and assisted living programs. Making matters a bunch worse, a state oversight committee dedicated to uncovering fraud now alleges that a number of people who've been directly linked to a variety of other crooked welfare schemes are currently receiving millions of dollars in payments from their state's assisted living programs as well. They include one individual who is currently under indictment and facing charges for their role as part of the Feeding the Future scam, but who's still receiving benefits from Minnesota's Department of Human Services. One Republican state lawmaker who's drawing attention to this latest scheme says it's unbelievable that such an obvious network of criminality continues to slip past any of the Walz administration's alleged oversight procedures. Yeah, alleged procedures. Furthermore, she says that despite months of efforts to the contrary, they continue to overlook the most basic checks, balances, and internal controls when it comes to monitoring the state's benefit system and enrolling providers. Basically, nothing's getting better at all. We're watching this one very carefully. The lawmaker goes on to say that even she expects more fraud to be uncovered in Minnesota's assisted living programs, and that, unfortunately, she thinks it's most likely going on in a bunch of other states as well. And so do we. In fact, just a couple of days ago, we talked about that big scam down Ohio way. Another Republican state lawmaker says that right now, Minnesota is the epicenter of fraud in the U.S. because scams are extremely easy to pull off there. Says they're smack dab in the middle of an epidemic, that dozens of additional organizations, they're now being probed, and he's warning that eventually all the schemes could wind up costing his state more than $2 billion. And by the way, some officials now claim the fraud damage could be exponentially more, and we're following this story very carefully. We'll have more tomorrow. For now, though, for his part, Governor Tim Walz currently extremely busy not doing anything about fraud, that big scandal in his backyard. But instead, he's signing a couple of executive orders which aim to reduce gun violence. It kind of sounds like deflection. In the meantime, a number of new local polls are flashing significant warning signs for Governor Walz. They show that no matter how you look at it, Walz's numbers are definitely heading in the wrong direction. Absolutely. With one poll even saying that the governor's overall approval rating is now the lowest it's been in years. Final thought, and this is the News Roundup Lowdown. Now, the state of Minnesota, it's the gift that just keeps on giving. And with each passing day, this fraud story gets bigger and bigger. It's taken on a life of its own. And it makes Watergate kind of look like child's play. Here's the bottom line. If Governor Timbo was not complicit in all that was happening in his state and on his watch, then he must have been asleep at the wheel. But this level of fraud and deception, it's louder than a Guns N' Roses concert, and there's absolutely no way anybody could sleep through that. It's like an all-new version of Welcome to the Jungle. It's just a different jungle this time around. By the way, thank you to the hundreds and hundreds of people who've been writing in to share their thoughts on a story which we think is terribly impactful. And so, the common consensus right now is that Tim Walz should either resign or face the specter of impeachment. Yeah, it's pretty much either A or B, and for now, there really is no gray area. Now, important to point out that it's not all doom and gloom for Time's Up Tim, and here's the kicker. You give it a couple of minutes, and in time, Timbo-mania, it'll come to an end, and the fine state of Minnesota will recover in time from this epic disaster. Also, if you're like me and you're concerned about the Timinator, there's this. Kamala Harris will most certainly run for president again in 2028. And she can always ask the future former governor to join her once again on what we call the campaign trail of defeat. Defeat and deceit, but mostly defeat and some deceit. And producer Davey, tell me you wouldn't vote for a Harris-Walz ticket. Come on.
Well, it's a moot point, Bill, because I don't think either one of them is going to be on the ticket.
Yeah, it is kind of a moot point. $2 billion or more worth of fraud. Now, think of how many needy people, Davey, in Minnesota could have been fed or maybe housed had all that money not been stolen by a big bunch of greedy fools.